Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the Mining podcast. And today's guest is Marna Cloete, who's the president of Ivanhoe Mines, a leading Canadian mining company committed to becoming a global leader in the supply of critical resources required to transition our world to a low carbon, renewable future. And Ivanhoe are focused on developing and expanding its four principal mining and exploration projects in Southern Africa. Marna is a registered chartered accountant and holds a master's degree in taxation from the University of Pretoria. She joined Ivanhoe back in 2006 and has played an instrumental role as part of Ivanhoe's leadership team, achieving a number of strategic milestones and continues to go from strength to strength. And she's on the podcast today to share her journey, why Ivanhoe is leading the way in supply of the much needed critical resources, and so much more, some other questions obviously I want to ask her around obviously her career and what she's achieved. So let's welcome Marna to the podcast. How you doing, Marna?
Hi, Rob. I'm doing well, and thanks for inviting me to participate in your podcast. It's a great privilege.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time. Obviously, we met at the mining in Durban, and that's when you obviously agreed to come on the podcast, and you would have listened to one or two episodes. So really appreciate you taking the time to come on and tell us a little bit about obviously of yourself. And obviously, I mentioned you've been with Ivanhoe since 2006, so you've obviously come on a huge journey. So I just wanted you to just tell our audience a little bit about yourself and about your background.
No problem, Rob. So sometimes I have to pinch myself if I think I've been with Ivanhoe for 17 years. And we always joke that we became an overnight success after 26 years of hard work, specifically in developing Kamoa-Kakula in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I started off as Ivanhoe as a financial controller. Back then, we were planning to list what was then a private company focused on exploration in Africa. So it wasn't called Ivanhoe Mines back then, it was called Ivanhoe Nickel and Platinum Limited. And we focused on exploration in Zambia, DRC, mainly the copper belt. Robert always had an eye for where the trends would go. So we were focused on ensuring that we would be supplying the next great copper project when the world will mostly need these critical metals. So I started off as a financial controller, and we were basically 10 people in the office. Today we have, I just got the statistics from Kamoa yesterday, we're probably over 18,000 people across the organization. And when you've been with a company the amount of time I have been, we're basically part of building each and every building block. It's like putting together a piece of Lego. So most of the people that work here, I know in some way, shape or form. At some point, I knew everybody by name. Those days are no longer possible, but I try and make an effort to get to know the people. So I started off as an accountant. I always joke, I'm a terrible accountant. I'm probably more of a strategist, a little bit of a politician, and a people's person, a team builder. And I know enough to know what I don't know. So I know to surround myself with the people with the right skill sets to make a successful team. We always say that when one succeeds, all succeeds. We've got a very great company culture, very inclusive. We work closely together. We don't work against each other, and we work for the greater good of Ivanhoe Mines. So I think that's my strong suit, bringing people together and making sure that we develop the projects that we are developing successfully. So maybe just a little bit about Ivanhoe Mines, the Ivanhoe Mines that we run here today. It's different from what most international people would know as Ivanhoe Mines, which was the old Ivanhoe Mines that owned OT, that was taken over by Rio Tinto in Mongolia. So we were just exploration focused in Africa. And we made the Kamoa-Kakula discovery, first the Kamoa discovery in 2008 in the DRC, and then in 2016, we've discovered Kakula. And we formed a joint venture partnership with Zijin from China, and we basically developed what will be the third or hopefully second largest copper mine in the world by the end of next year. It's a fully integrated mining complex together with a smelter. And then at the same time, we're developing Platreef in South Africa, which is a precious metals mine with copper and nickel byproducts. It's basically, we say it's actually more of a nickel mine nowadays than it would be a PGM mine, just because of the massive resource. That mine will go into production in the third quarter of next year. And similarly, Kipushi in the DRC, which is a zinc project, all brownfields project, that will also go into production in the third quarter of next year. So we're really quite busy. And at the same time, you mentioned 4 projects. We're doing a lot of exploration throughout Africa, in DRC specifically, but we're entering a few new frontiers. So we're quite excited about that.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that you said you started with 10 employees. When you started, you had 10 employees, and now you've got 18,000. That is a huge number. And I suppose not many people will go through that transition from being a very small company to a very large company. How, obviously, you've gone through that journey. What were some of the highlights during that time? From having 10 to 18,000 people?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to find people that fit with your ethos culturally. And we've always tried to keep our structures flat and not become too bureaucratic. I think if you have a majority shareholder or a chairman like we do, you need to keep things quite entrepreneurial and nimble and quick decision making. And that's what we've always tried to do. Even though we're an organization of 18,000 plus people today, we keep our senior team relatively small, and we're a very close-knit group of people. We work together like a small little family. You spend so many hours at work that you really do need to like the people you work with. And I would say that's been one of our great success factors, is that we really have a great senior team leading this organization. And that's not speaking about myself, but the people that work alongside me are really all experts in their field. And I've been fortunate to have great people working with me. One of the other learnings, and we've made mistakes along the way, I think it's also about bringing in the right skill sets at the right time. During this growth period, there are times when you get jittery about growth, where you start to almost overdo it and you bring in too many people. And then what you have is people are clambering over each other to try and prove their worth in the organization. And you have people almost trying to outshine each other because they need to find a purpose in the organization. So I would say it's about the right timing, bringing the right people in at the right time. So growth is great, but it takes a lot of effort to keep your culture the same. And we are trying to have a little bit of that close-knit family culture, even though we're quite a large organization today.
Yeah, and it looks like obviously you're doing a great job with that anyway. So obviously, I'd like to congratulate you.
Thanks, Rob.
Ivanhoe is specifically focused obviously on the DRC and South Africa for their mining operations. Regions and other companies may perceive as having those areas as high risk. Just wondering if you can explain the strategic reasoning and factors that have been key to your success in operating in those locations and jurisdictions.
So maybe just first touching on the jurisdiction, Robert always has the saying where he's talking about a spaceship. If you were a marshal coming from space and you wanted to see where copper will be, it will be in Africa. So that's why we've always focused on Africa. And you have to take the cards that you are being dealt. And I think a lot of times people have a perception about these jurisdictions as being high risk, more because of the unknown, and it's because it's because they haven't spent enough time there than because it's really as risky as they perceive it to be. I myself personally spend a lot of time in the DRC itself. I probably travel there once a month for a week or so. And it's really about building relationships with key stakeholders, whether it be government, community leaders, business people in the area where you operate. You need to build out your network, and you need to start forming partnerships with people in these jurisdictions, and also have open conversations with those governments. During COVID, we were fortunate. We could travel into DRC and back to South Africa, and we made a concerted effort of taking government officials through to our mine to show them what we are doing. Sometimes it's as simple as showing them the logistical challenges we are facing, and explaining to them that if you change certain things in terms of border control, for example, operating hours at the border, it will have this impact on our business. And since you are a shareholder in our business, this is the impact it will have on you. And you know, when somebody explains something to you in a boardroom, it's one thing. When somebody shows something to you, it clicks. And I think a lot of time it's at times it's just about taking the time and building those relationships, making the effort to take people through what we are doing. I think the future of these critical metals are in Africa. That's why you see all the world leaders visiting Africa, taking the African continent serious. And everybody's trying to secure supply. So this is the place to be, and this is the place where we need to learn to operate.
The role of minerals and metals in the global energy transition and reliability of supply. Obviously, you've just highlighted some of that. What are some of the initiatives Ivanhoe is undertaking to contribute to this transition?
So I gave you a little bit of a hint in my intro, but we are, at heart, we're explorers. So we were, sometimes there's a saying by Gary Player that the great South African golfer, the more you practice, the luckier you get. So we do firmly believe that the more we practice, the luckier we got. And we still believe that the biggest value we can add to our shareholders is by discovering similar type ore bodies like the Kamoa-Kakula project that we've discovered and developed. So Ivanhoe Mines is uniquely placed in our understanding of the geology in this area to try and find more of these ore bodies that we will need for the energy transition. But we are also venturing out and entering a few new jurisdictions. I'm not at liberty to talk about most of those jurisdictions at this point in time, but it's within our comfort zone. And we are quite excited about what that could mean for the company as we move forward.
Yeah. I wonder if you just tell us a little bit about the renewable energy use at your mines. And obviously you recently have a partnership with SNEL and EV use at your operations. So I just wonder if you just tell us a little bit more around the renewable energy that you're using at your sites.
Sure. So in the DRC, water is in abundance, but power is unfortunately not. And SNEL is the state-owned power entity. They own a lot of the old infrastructure in the country, and everything's driven by hydropower. So when we decided that we were going to develop Kamoa-Kakula, obviously one of the key things you take into consideration is water and power. Water's no issue, but power's always been an issue in terms of development in the DRC. What our team then did was we went out and looked at all dilapidated state-owned infrastructure. And we entered into negotiations with the government to try and see if we can maybe refurbish some of those old hydropower plants and thereby adding megawatts into the grid. So this is not only for consumption by ourselves at Kamoa-Kakula, but by adding additional power into the grid, we also add to the social use of the country and the upliftment of the country. Ultimately, these assets are still owned by government. So we do it in a public-private partnership, and we get repaid on providing the financing for these projects through a discount in our electricity tariff until the loan financing that we advance to government is repaid. So we need to find these sort of innovative type of structuring solutions in the jurisdictions where we operate to ensure that we build up the infrastructure in these countries and to enable us to run these mega projects in war-torn countries. The DRC have quite a sad history in that regard, and I think it's our collective responsibility to ensure that we build up some of the infrastructure that may have fallen into disrepair.
Yeah, and have you got any other schemes in terms of infrastructure that you're working closely with the government?
We obviously we're working on a border at Kipushi. So there's one border crossing that everybody on the Copper Belt's currently using, which is Kasumbalesa. So we're currently negotiating with government to do another border crossing right next to the Kipushi mine, but we will also use it for Kamoa-Kakula. So we've signed an MOU with government for that border crossing, and that will also include road repairs, both on the DRC side as well as on the Zambian side. So it's a cross-governmental initiative, and it will be financed on a similar basis. So that those negotiations are currently ongoing, and it's part of my regular visits to the DRC, having these discussions around the border crossing. Maybe just speaking a little bit on sort of other initiatives we are following in terms of our energy efficiency at our sites. We've piloted electric fleet at our Platreef project, and we did find that we had issues on efficiencies. So we are working closely with Epiroc in a strategic collaboration to see that we can develop these machines in order to get close to the diesel efficiencies. Obviously, ultimately, we want to have electric fleet and use it underground. And it's up to operators like ourselves to work with the OEMs to get the equipment ready so that we can transition away from diesel and over to electric fleet.
It's obviously important for partnerships and creating value, as you've highlighted. Why is social license to operate so important for your business and other businesses in success and delivering on the necessary outcomes needed for this green transition?
So I think this is one of the topics that's very close to my heart. And I find that when I speak to international audiences, if you look at the West, there's a big focus on climate change, rightly so, and environmental gets a lot of attention. But when you operate in Africa, you need to have a very big social focus. There's a lot of poverty still throughout Africa, and mining companies make such a big impact in the areas where we operate. The first time I visited Kamoa-Kakula, there was like one little tent, one drill rig drilling. You couldn't even go to the toilet. There was a bucket. Today, we have over 5,000 people sleeping at the camp. It's massive. We have highways. And if you think about the development we've brought about, and that's really only happened over the past 5 years. Before that, it was really an exploration program. But since the onset, we took the view that we're going to invest in our communities and make sure we take our communities along with us on this journey. We've started small livelihood projects initially, and now we've grown those projects into viable businesses. The mine buys a lot of the produce from these livelihood farmers. These livelihood farmers have expanded their businesses. They've employed people, but we don't only do it with farming. We've started different businesses. We've got a brick making factory where we've employed a co-op out of the community. We help them with business skills, how to do their own books, how to submit their own tax returns. We purchase bricks from them. If we can't purchase all the bricks, they sell the bricks in Kolwezi. So we've created like an enterprise scheme around the mine with our community members. We also recruit from our adjacent communities, and that way, when you take up your space in people's backyard, because that's what we do as mining companies, the people come along because you're part of their livelihood and you're changing lives. If I take one person we employ today at the mine, one employed individual look after almost 20 to 30 people. So it has a massive economic impact on people. I had an interview the other day, and I mentioned to the two gentlemen on the other side of the call, we are fortunate because we used to live in developed countries. We used to have our iPad and our PC next to us. We used to switching on the lights. We used to have running water. When you operate where we operate, people don't have that. And you can't expect people to just want that for the rest of their lives. You have to take them along. You have to upgrade their standard of living. But I think we should also learn from the Europes, the USs, the Chinas in terms of how to develop responsibly, how to manage greenhouse gas emissions. How are we going to do that upliftment throughout Africa? And that's a collective responsibility. That's not just a mining company responsibility, but that's something that the mining industry gives you the opportunity to be a part of. And that's what really excites me about the industry, is the impact you have on people's lives.
Certainly, and that's like really good to hear. And as you mentioned, one person can impact 40 to 50 people within your obviously operations. So no, that's like I said, that's really good to hear. Ivanhoe's BBBEE partnership at Platreef was unique at the time of within its conception, and continues to be a model for local partnership around mineral projects. Could you outline the design of the community trust and how this concept came to fruition?
Yeah, so this really speaks to ownership in mining companies, and it's different throughout Africa. Some states own directly into projects, like in the DRC. Kamoa-Kakula is owned 20% by the DRC state directly. And in South Africa, we have what we call a broad-based Black economic empowerment structure. And that's something that really had a bit of a bad reputation over the years. You had one or two individuals in South Africa that became extremely rich out of Black economic ownership in mining companies. And I think at the time when we did our transaction, it was sort of, it was a difficult transaction to do because we were still an exploration company. It's very difficult to raise funding for partners to purchase into exploration companies. And we decided we are going to do a broad-based ownership structure. So what we did was we created a trust for our adjacent communities. If you're familiar with our Platreef project, it's right in the middle of 20 communities, about 150,000 people. So it's really a social project. The engineering's the easy part. It's about how you live next door to each other, because you become neighbors. And if they're owners in the project, then you align your interests, because if you're successful, they will be successful. So we created this trust. We pay dividends. We basically manufacture dividends for now, and ultimately when the mine goes into operations, this trust will receive dividends, and this trust can apply those dividends to public benefit organization activities. So they get tax breaks for it, and they can support educational initiatives, sort of any initiatives that uplifts the standard of living for the adjacent communities. What we also did was there's a requirement to have an entrepreneurial ownership component in South Africa. Is we took all the small little businesses that were on our database at the time that did some business with the mine, so catering services, cleaning services, and we gave them ownership in the mine as well. And that way your vendors are also owners, and you align interests. So it's all about shared value and aligned interest. And subsequent to our transaction, the mining code in South Africa actually changed to basically follow this model, albeit in different percentages. So we're quite proud of being trendsetters in terms of our Black economic empowerment transaction.
Yeah. And what strategies and tools have been most successful in maintaining good relationships with the communities? Obviously, you've highlighted one there. Is there any other strategies or tools that you use?
I think the biggest thing here is communication. people look at mining companies and you think it's only the technical skills. You need your mining engineers, you need your metallurgists. Today's mining companies are almost like half technical staff, half soft skill staff, and people who can communicate well, who can convey the story, who can convey what a mining company is busy with. And it's also about managing expectations. Our project in South Africa will be a highly mechanized mine, so it's different to what you see on the Western Limb in South Africa. And we've been open and transparent with our communities from the onset. We will not be employing really more than 2,000 people. So you need to, from the onset, be honest and open with your community. Say, there's only going to be 2,000 jobs, but that's why we're doing enterprise development. That's why we're helping you identify opportunities away from the mine that will allow you to sustain a business. That's why we provide training in entrepreneurship, for example. So it's about having those conversations. It's about understanding what the needs are of your communities. And us as senior executives cannot live on a plane somewhere and just go from conference to conference and talk about what we do. We need to walk the talk. Community members want to see senior executives. They want to engage with us. We need to be on the ground, and we need to deal with some of the hard, thorny issues ourselves. And I think they respect us taking it serious because they are one of our most important shareholders.
As a female in an executive position in a progressive and innovative company like Ivanhoe, what challenges have you had to sort of overcome during your career, and especially in the mining industry, that has got you to where it has today?
So, Rob, this is always such a difficult question because you never want to see yourself as in today's world. Back then, when I started my career in mining, female quotas wasn't even a thing, to be honest with you. So I never felt like I had a glass ceiling or I didn't have access. I've always worked in this progressive entity, and Robert's always been super supportive of mentoring me and getting me ready for a leadership role in this organization. But not everybody's as fortunate as I am. And the big thing about talking about female representation in mining is that you don't want to set that expectation that it's about filling quotas or ticking proxy advisor boxes. You want the best person for the job. And I think that's been my attitude from the onset. I will be the best person for the job. And when the guys work till 11, I will work till 12. And it's really been through hard work and planning. I really wanted a family too on a personal level. And I remember back then, my oldest kid will turn 16 this year. South Africa's maternity policies weren't as progressive as maternity policies are now. So you get, I think, 4 weeks worth of salary. And then the other 3 months, you get 4 months maternity. The other 3 months you can claim from the Workmen's Compensation Fund. And I just couldn't afford to go on maternity leave because I was the sole breadwinner, basically, at the time. So what I did was I went and negotiated. I said, listen, I'm willing to work, but I would really like to experience having a kid, staying at home. Can I work from home and then submit timesheets but get my pay? And luckily, back then, times have changed, but back then, our CEO was willing to accommodate the request, and I managed to earn my full salary. But I put in the hard yards because I knew I wanted to be successful in my career one day. So I think it was really for me about not really expecting special treatment and going toe to toe with everybody else. Today, the workplace is much more progressive. You can work remotely much more easily. We didn't have things like Teams and Zoom back then. It's really been a trend so I think it's become easier for females over the years to really participate in the industry. And then it's also been about realizing what the mining industry is about. It's not just about the miners, and it's not just about the metallurgists and the technical degrees. There's a lot of strategy that goes into what we do, a lot of social planning that goes into what we do. And females are good communicators. We tend to take people along, and it's using our strengths to achieve a common goal. So I would say it's probably a combination of that.
Yeah, no, and you're right there. In terms of looking at your competition, for instance, if you are in an organisation and you are probably dominated by males, and you're all seeking the same one position higher, it's looking at your competition and making sure your differential is better than theirs. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And you're looking at building upon your own strengths, looking at the market, but building upon your own strengths and having that determination that you are going to be where you want to be and where you want to head to.
Yeah, you need to be hungry. You need to want to go for it. And you need to be a little bit thick-skinned sometimes. You know, it is a tough industry, or it is a male-dominated industry. I've seen myself as one of the boys. You know, I can hold my own in the bar. I can hold my own in the boardroom. And it's been, I think that attitude's assisted me in terms of where I got to. I never really felt like I needed special treatment. And you know, there are certain gender differentials, like having a family, where I had to go and set things up for myself. You know, I had to make sure that I get help at home. I'm fortunate my parents stay close to me. I've got a very supportive husband that helps out with the kids. I've got 3 children, three boys. So I've been fortunate in terms of the infrastructure I have around me to do what I do. But that was it was a choice. To put in place these things, and I do try and spend the quality time I can with my children, but something's got to give. You can't have it all, so you have to decide. You're either going to be that full-time hands-on mom, or you're going to be a professional and spend quality time with your children when you get the gap. And I always try and be home over weekends. They're anyway so busy during a school week that you never see them anyway. You end up sitting by yourself. Even I always have these good intentions. Now it's a quiet week, I'll go home early, spend time with the kids, then they're not home. So I try and make most of the weekends.
Yeah, I understand. What advice can you give to women in the mining industry that want to sort of follow in a similar path as yourself, but they may have doubts, they may have had setbacks in the past, or face certain individual challenges because they are in a male-dominated industry? What advice would you give them in order for them to achieve more greatness and maybe work their way up the career ladder as you have done?
I think it's a bit of a psychological thing. You need to tell yourself you can do it. I think there's a lot of women, and I'm speaking about myself. You know, females always look at themselves. You always think you're not pretty enough. You're not clever enough. You're a little bit overweight. You could look better. You could do this. You could do that better. Where I find with guys, they're much more self-confident than women usually are. So I think it's about that confidence. You need to believe in yourself, and you need to exert that. If you exert confidence, people will have confidence in you. How can you expect of somebody else to believe in you if you can't even believe in yourself? So I think that's the first thing. It's like, look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you've got this, because you do. There's no reason why you should stand back in any scenario. If you've got the education, so say you go toe to toe in a situation where both of you have the same education, there's no reason why the female should be viewed as inferior. And it's sometimes it's a confidence thing. So I think it's a confidence thing. It's also a little bit of we live in a very woke world where you need to be very sensitive about what you say and what you do and how you handle situations. I try and not take myself too serious. Sometimes I'm going to get it wrong. You make mistakes. Sometimes I say silly things in front of technical people. And then I laugh at myself, because you need to be able to laugh at yourself, because you're going to make mistakes, and they're going to make mistakes too, and they're going to sound stupid sometimes too. So you need to take it with a pinch of salt, and then I think you need to chin up and plan. If you want to be a senior executive, you need to know it's going to be a hard path to get there, and you need to going to make a few sacrifices. And then similarly, if you're just trying to make ends meet and get by, try and make your life easier by getting in place help where you need help. If you need help on the home front, get the necessary help on the home front, and plan accordingly, and see how you can map your career to get to where you want to be. Not everybody's going to end up being the CEO, but you can be the best version of yourself. And I think sometimes it's just as simple as confidence.
Yeah, no, that's good. You've obviously been with Ivanhoe, as we mentioned, 17 years. What would you say has been the most satisfying part of your journey? And what value have you got from those 17 years working at Ivanhoe? You've obviously seen many changes in yourself and as well as the company. What would you say is giving you the most satisfaction, both personally and both within the organisation?
I'm extremely proud of what we've achieved at Kamoa-Kakula. If I mentioned when I was there the first time, a little tent. We're busy building a massive smelter. If you go to site now, it's a hive of activity. It's construction. It's more than 16,000 people on site, beavering away, building this world-class project. And to think that I played a part in that, from discovery through to where we are today, putting together a fully integrated mine in what's considered a difficult jurisdiction like the DRC. And I wouldn't say that I had any special education from like a world-class university abroad. I'm a normal girl from a sort of middle-class neighborhood in the middle of South Africa, and I was part of that journey. And I think working for a company like Ivanhoe Mines, where it's quite entrepreneurial, we've grown over time. Obviously, we've matured. We've become a bit more serious of late, because you have to be serious when you are a big operator like we are. But it's been that journey from being a small little innovative explorer, going through that growth spurt, the capital raisings we did, the cultural immersion. We've got Chinese partners, we've got Japanese partners, we have African government partners, we have African community partners, and it's being able to bridge that gap. You need to be so many people in one person. You need to be able to speak competently in the boardroom. You need to be able to speak competently to communities. And I think that's been the most fulfilling part, is just dealing with all these stakeholders and taking them along on this journey and doing it so successfully. I think we were actually quite surprised with our own success. I still remember when we tried to raise funds for Kamoa-Kakula's development, a lot of the guys who would do a due diligence on us would say, well, you don't really have a track record as an operator, you're explorers, so we're not sure. And I get a call. Ian Cockrell is on the board of BHP. He used to be on our board, and he called me. He said, Marna, I'm so surprised as to what you achieved here. You guys have done such a magnificent job. And it's been with a team that we've built from scratch. We built that mine on time, on budget, during a pandemic. It's been a wonderful achievement. I think if I retire today, I retire with a smile on my face.
No, good to hear. And I've got to ask, obviously, what's it like working closely with Robert Friedland? What do you sort of learn from him, and what aspiration do you get from obviously working with him pretty closely all over these last 17 years that you've been with Ivanhoe?
Okay, so I'm going to start with a little secret, Rob. When I started at Ivanhoe, I didn't know who Robert was. I obviously learned quite quickly who Robert is. It's one of those dual answered questions. He's an absolute visionary, and you meet very few people in your life that's got that type of brilliance and the way his mind works. And it's been an absolute privilege to sit under his wing. He's been a great mentor to me. Him together with our previous CEO, Lars Eric, I've learned everything I know from the two of them. The great thing about Robert is he always pushes you to do better, to do more, and he trusts you completely. Like he empowers you. He empowers you to make decisions. He can be a tough guy to work for too. So it's not just seeing the visionary and the leader, but it's also he pushes you to be a better version of yourself. And sometimes when he calls, you think, oh, that was a brutal call. I'm really trying my best. But when you reflect, most of the times, I'm not going to say always, because he may listen to this podcast and then he thinks he's always right. But most of the times, Robert is right. And the great thing about him is he always knows, he's got a nose. He always knows where we can add more value. He always has a good idea. And he always knows where to go next. You know, it's somebody you can really learn from. You can look up to. He's a real titan of the industry. Tough guy to work for, but it's been very rewarding working with him.
Yeah, and you mentioned ideas. Is there ideas that he's got at the moment that I suppose you can speak about that you probably think is probably a bit way out there, but eventually you could move down to those ideas could come to fruition.
So Robert is quite infused. He's got a company in France called iPulse, and they're doing a lot of work on technologies that may improve the way we mine in terms of energy efficiency. So he's very infused about that. We are collaborating in terms of being a practical implementation partner on some of it. So that's the one idea where I would like to see the results of it and see where that goes. And he's really excited about it. And then, just in terms of basic efficiencies, operational efficiencies, this, he would fly in from 1,000 miles. He wouldn't be in the detail, but he would ask one question and you would think, why didn't I think of that? And that's the thing that makes him so great. He zooms in, he just pushes the right button and he gets all of us to focus. And that's the one thing I'm going to take away from Robert is I'm going to try and be that person that can sit 1,000 miles away and just zoom in and say, why aren't we thinking about this? And sometimes it's right in front of everybody. But he just connects the dots a little bit differently than we do. So that's Robert.
Yeah. And lastly, what's the vision and outlook for Ivanhoe over the sort of next medium term, next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so obviously we're trying to get all our projects into production. So that will be the case next year, bringing both Kipushi and Platreef online. And then we're growing Kamoa-Kakula. That phase 3 will go online at the end of next year. So basically beginning of 2025. And then we want to see ourselves as a diversified global player, and basically in the critical metal space. And we've been beavering away. We're seeing some successes, not ready to talk about it yet, in terms of bringing online more exploration success. And we're not opposed to M&A if it makes sense and it's value accretive to our shareholders. But I think we see ourselves as a modern, innovative, progressive mining company that wants to grow our footprint. And we want to be trendsetters, and we want to mine with a greater purpose.
Yeah, and you're certainly doing all of that, or have done all of that in your time there as the company has grown. So, Marna, really appreciate your time in taking the time to have a chat with us. Really fascinating to hear your journey and your advice and wisdom as well. So really appreciate your time. If our audience wants to obviously follow the story of Ivanhoe, I take it obviously they can go to the website. Do you have a social media presence, and what platforms would they be on?
Yes, we are on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn. Robert's got his own personal Twitter account where he retweets out our tweets as well. So you can follow Robert in his personal capacity on Twitter. And then obviously you can go to our website and find all the links there.
Yeah, great.
We do a lot of great videos on social media. So for people that's not as familiar with mining projects that want to go and look to see how the construction of a mining project takes place, we've done time lapses. Informative.
Great. We'll include some of those in our show notes accompanying this as well, those social media links, so for easy access. Really appreciate your time, and maybe you may want to come on in a year's time and give us an update on how Ivanhoe has moved forward with some of these projects. Be really great to hear you again.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for having me and listening to the Ivanhoe Mines story.
No, thank you as well. And those that are listening, hope you enjoyed that. So much to take away from this particular episode. And what a great story, from working in a company with 10 employees to 18,000. It just shows you what you can achieve if you put your mind to it and have a vision, as Ivanhoe have. So really appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing this particular episode and all our episodes to others within the mining industry, but also people outside of the mining industry, because especially this podcast, this episode, showing people outside of the mining industry what's capable and what a mining company can do for local communities, no matter where you are in the world, I think is important. And we always talk about mining and the image and the brand of mining needs to be improved. Well, if more people hear stories of what Ivanhoe have done, then it's only going to help our cause. So appreciate your continued support. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.